If you were a kid in the 2000s, then you might remember a movie called Chicken Little, which released back in October of 2005. I'm pretty sure that this was the second movie I ever watched in a movie theater, my first being The Incredibles. I used to rewatch this movie a lot whenever it would air on Disney Channel when I was a kid, but I don't think I've seen this movie since I was in middle school, which would have been about 10 years ago at this point. So I definitely don't have the best memory of this movie. Obviously, I remember a lot of the major plot points, but I wouldn't be able to remember all of the tiny bits and pieces. I ended up finding out that this movie was actually not well received back when it first came out, and I couldn't really help but to question why. Is this a case of something I liked as a kid not holding up when I rewatch it as an adult, or was the hate on it forced? Well, there's only one way to find out. In honor of the film's 20th anniversary, let's give it a revisit to see how well it holds up now that I'm much older. First off, to talk about the development of the movie, I think it's worth mentioning the fact that this is actually an adaptation of an old fairy tale. I'm pretty sure that I assumed such when I was a kid, but I never actually knew that for sure. So finding out about this was actually pretty interesting. This was also Disney's first 3D CGI film, so this was the beginning of something new for them. The film started development in September of 2001, where Chicken Little was actually going to be a paranoid female character voiced by Holly Hunter, who would later go on to voice Elastigirl in The Incredibles. The plot was going to revolve around Chicken Little going to summer camp to relieve her paranoia, as well as grow closer with her dad. However, she would end up finding out that her camp counselor was plotting against her hometown. The concept of a female protagonist was scrapped due to the fact that they wanted Chicken Little to be a character who would get picked on, and short boys tend to be easy targets for school bullies. However, the main reason that led them to this decision was the fact that market research told them that both boys and girls would be a lot more willing to see a movie with a male protagonist. However, boys are less likely to want to watch a movie with a female protagonist. At least that's what they believed until Frozen came out in 2013 and became the highest grossing animated film at the time. Later on in January of 2003, Chicken Little started to be rewritten into the final version that we have today. However, the alien invasion plotline was not actually a part of the original draft and was something that was added later on. As a result of this, 25 scenes were scrapped in favor of the alien invasion plot, since they thought it added more stakes and emotion to the story. When the time came to recast Chicken Little, they had a whole list of actors they were considering for the role, and while I can see some of these picks pulling it off, I honestly find others to be hilariously bad. Michael J. Fox, Dave Foley, D.B. Sweeney, Ben Stiller, Matt Damon, Leonardo DiCaprio, Shia LaBeouf, Steve Martin, John Heder, Matthew Broderick, Jack Black, and Chicken Little! Paul Walker, Robin Williams, Nathan Lane, Drake Bell, Josh Peck, Keanu Reeves, and David Spade were all actors that Disney were considering giving the role to. None of these ended up getting the role, and they eventually landed on Zach Braff because they thought that his higher-pitched voice provided something special. I never knew about anything I mentioned about the development of this film prior to making this video, so it was actually pretty interesting to discover all of this. On to the actual movie now. It starts out with a pretty funny intro where the narrator, who is actually Chicken Little's father, Buck Cluck, is having a hard time figuring out how to start the movie. So he decides to just show us the day that everything took a turn for the worse. In the town of Okie Oaks, Chicken Little is trying to warn everyone that the sky is falling, which causes a bunch of panic in the town. There's some good humorous bits in the midst of all the chaos, such as this rabbit having way too many kids, and this homage to Raiders of the Lost Ark. When Chicken Little tries to explain that he got hit by a piece of the sky shaped like a stop sign, nobody believes him, and they all assume that he got hit by an acorn. Cut to 1 year later, where Chicken Little and his dad find out that a movie is being made about him, and his dad goes on a whole rant that everyone should just move on from his mistake, in which Chicken Little tries to explain that he has a plan, but his dad doesn't let him explain and just tells him to lay low. Then there's a scene of Chicken Little trying to make his way over to school while a song called One Little Slip plays, which was a song that was made specifically for the movie. This song was actually how I ended up rediscovering this movie after so long. I just randomly remembered it one day when I was going through a hard time, and I used this song to help me cope. It's funny how we sometimes remember stuff at exactly the right timing. It really goes to show that the media that you're exposed to as a kid can definitely leave an impression on you. I like how during this scene they show Chicken Little using random objects to his advantage. It goes to show that he actually has some ingenuity to him. Although he does end up losing his pants during this, and while he makes a new pair out of a piece of paper, he gets stuck inside his locker and has to use a hanger to get out. So it goes to show that despite his smarts, he's still not quite the brightest, and he makes some mistakes along the way. He has his ups and downs. After that, we get an introduction to Chicken Little's classmates and his supporting characters, Runt the Pig, Abby the Ugly Duckling, and Fish Out of Water. No, seriously, that's his name. Real quick thing I want to mention, I like how all of the characters in this movie are animals and there are no humans. While they're playing dodgeball, he explains his plan to do something great to make everyone forget about the whole sky falling incident to Abby. A scene that I found funny is that after this porcupine ends up with dodgeballs in his hair, the teacher has to take him to the nurse, and then the other players just immediately go on their phones. Keep in mind, this movie was from 2005. They predicted the future here because this is entirely accurate to what kids would do nowadays. Abby suggests to Chicken Little that he needs to talk things out with his dad to get closure, but as Abby gets hit with a dodgeball, Chicken Little tries to stand up for her, so they throw him at the window and he accidentally pulls the fire alarm, which gets him sent to the principal's. While they're in the car, Chicken Little talks to his dad about joining the baseball team, but warns him not to get his hopes too high. Then there's a brief bit where Buck thinks about how his wife would know what to do, in which they heavily imply that she's not alive anymore, which explains why Buck feels so lost right now. Then a montage of Chicken Little practicing baseball ensues, where he is always being overshadowed by Foxy on the team. When the final game comes, Chicken Little is actually brought up to bat for the first time, and just when it seemed like the game was lost, he scores the winning point and is celebrated as the MVP. Normally in a movie like this, you would expect him to lose, but the fact that he had something this good happen to him this early in the movie is actually pretty cool. Later that night, Chicken Little and his father celebrate together, and they think that everyone will forget about the sky is falling incident now. However, it's right after this where we find out that Chicken Little's story was actually not so far-fetched, as he gets hit in the head by a panel that is designed to camouflage itself. Gee, talk about lightning striking the same place twice. When his father goes to check up on him, Chicken Little hides it from him, and after Buck leaves, he calls his friends to come over to look at what he found and give him advice on what he should do.
Call Abby.
So you're telling me that his dad heard him scream earlier, but he doesn't hear this loud metal clang? It's not that big of a deal, but I just wanted to point that out. Since Chicken Little never actually talked to his father about this, Abby suggests that now is the time to do it, but he refutes, saying that he doesn't care what this thing is, he just wants it out of his life. But before they can finish their conversation, Fish presses a button that sends the panel back to where it came from, so they have to chase after him. They get intercepted by Buck on their way down, and Abby suggests telling him the truth, in which Chicken Little just says,
"What are we talking about?"
I always like that running gag in this movie. When they get to the baseball field, they see a UFO land, and these aliens inside of metal suits reveal themselves. Let me just say, I remember being really impressed by the animation of this sequence when I saw this in theaters back in 2005. As they head into the UFO, Chicken Little notices this little orange guy right here, and when he winks at it, it winks back at him. Then he leaves to catch up with the others, and the alien follows him unbeknownst to him. Runt gets electrocuted and has a panic attack, so he has to breathe into a bag to calm himself down. This movie would have actually been how I learned about panic attacks as a kid, come to think of it. They successfully recover Fish, and Runt ends up discovering a map showcasing planets that the aliens destroyed, and Earth is their next target. As they try to exit, they encounter the aliens and a chase sequence ensues. They run over to the school building in order to ring the bell to warn everyone, and we get one of my favorite examples of Chicken Little's resourcefulness, where he uses a soda bottle as a makeshift jetpack. Also, that bit where Runt can't put the dollar in the vending machine always reminded me of that SpongeBob episode, Wet Painters. When Chicken Little rings the bell, the aliens are hurt by the sound. Where have I seen this before? The townspeople show up to see what's going on, but they miss the aliens because they all got distracted by a penny on the floor. A pretty funny bit, I'll add. And nobody believes Chicken Little's story. The next day, Buck is responding to a bunch of phone calls about last night's incident, and this bit always made my father and I laugh when we'd watch this movie together.
Your hate mailbox is full.
Abby suggests that Chicken Little should talk to his dad now, in which he tells her that it's too late for that. And the little orange guy shows up again, which freaks them out, but Fish is able to communicate with him. He tells them that his name is Kirby, and that he got left behind. Can I just say that I always found Kirby to be really cute? I love how he just acts like a pet. The alien army shows up in search of Kirby, and in the midst of the panic, Chicken Little tries to explain to Buck that the aliens are on a rescue mission to find their kid, but Buck doesn't believe him, and Chicken Little runs off knowing that his dad won't listen to him. Chicken Little saves Kirby from being run over, but they end up inside of a movie theater. Then Buck finds him, and Chicken Little finally tells him that he was never there for him when he needed him. Buck admits that he's right and apologizes. With this being my first time watching this movie in a really long time, this scene really delivered an emotional punch. Not the sobbing my eyes out kind of way, but rather still feeling empathy for the moment kind of way. I like this take on the father-son dynamic. Buck made some mistakes, rightfully gets called out for it, and without any sort of disdain towards Chicken Little, he admits to his mistakes and becomes a better parent because of it. This shows that a parent and their kids should communicate these issues to each other, which is actually a really good moral for a kids movie. Buck agrees to tag along with Chicken Little to save Kirby, but before they leave, Chicken Little takes this opportunity to confess to Abby and kisses her. I will say, I always felt like this part seemed a bit rushed. The dodgeball scene was really the only scene in the movie prior to this that felt like there was anything romantic going on between the two of them. I think there should have been a bit more build up to this, because it does almost seem like it comes out of nowhere. So it lacks that emotional punch of the protagonist finally overcoming another hurdle that the prior moment with his dad had. Although I will say that it's pretty funny how Abby is so over the moon about this for the rest of the film that she's just acting like she's drunk. They make their way to the town hall where they give Kirby back to his parents and they get interrogated by Kirby's father, but Kirby convinces them that they're telling the truth, so he lets them go. The aliens repair the damage to the town, apologize for the misunderstanding, and they reveal that they come to Okie Oaks every year for the acorns. Hence the map from earlier wasn't for destroying planets, but rather for acorn spots. The paddle that hit Chicken Little falls off again, so they put it back in place and take off. We then cut to 1 year later, where all of the townspeople are watching the movie based off of Chicken Little's life, which instead of being some sort of comedy or mockumentary, was modified to be an action movie about Chicken Little fighting aliens in space. When it ends, the crowd cheers for Chicken Little, and that's the end of the movie. Overall, I always found Chicken Little to be a likable protagonist due to his resourcefulness and nerdy nature, and I like the dynamic displayed with his friends. They feel unique from other friendships in 3D animated films of the time like Toy Story or Shrek, which I think just makes it a shame that we never got to see more of these characters. I also really enjoyed the conflict and resolution with Chicken Little and Buck Cluck. Buck wasn't a very good father, sure, but that's supposed to be the point of the story. He made a lot of mistakes, but eventually he made up for it. The alien plotline was a nice way to add some more stakes to the story, and I also also like how they used this to mirror the father-son bonding storyline. The movie has a pretty simple plot, but that's what I like about it. They used the simple plot very effectively and showed that they didn't need any extra stuff to make it land. Heck, they even managed to make a plot about an alien invasion feel simple. Normally these kinds of movies are pretty complex, so after seeing this premise used in other films since 2005, it actually makes going back to this movie feel like a nice change of pace. The humor in this movie really lands too. I think it has to be one of the funniest animated films from the 2000s. The animation definitely looked great for the time, although I do feel like it's aged a bit worse than other 3D animated films from the 2000s have. I think it's just mostly because there are some shots here and there that could have used better lighting. Although a strong suit of the animation that I think has aged well is that I think the fur textures on the characters look pretty nice. And the fact that they pulled this off so well back in 2005 is actually kind of impressive. I also like the film's use of squash and stretch. This is a lot less common in 3D animation, so I appreciate the fact that they put it to use here. It really gives some extra pizzazz to the characters' emotions. And the soundtrack for the film is an absolute banger. Seriously, why don't they make soundtracks for animated films like this anymore? The songs used are either made exclusively for the movie, or were songs that were already pretty well recognizable. The fact that they didn't really use any songs that were pretty new at the time actually helps to avoid the soundtrack from feeling dated, which is a mistake that some more recent animated movies have made. This movie was part of the reason why I ended up becoming a fan of the band REM, since their song It's the End of the World as We Know It and I Feel Fine was used for one of the alien invasion sequences, so I have to thank this movie for that. Part of me is curious to see what the version of the film with female Chicken Little would have looked like, or what it was like prior to the alien plot being added. However, I love the movie the way it is, and I wouldn't change anything about it. Prior to rewatching the movie for this video, I wasn't sure if my opinion on it would change, but I'd say that the movie is just as good as I remember it. I used to rewatch this movie pretty often as a kid, and normally when I make videos about a movie, I watch the movie twice, and even after watching this twice within less than a week, I still wouldn't be opposed to watching it again. What could I say? I guess it's just one of those movies that has a nice hook to it. If anything, making this video just makes me confused as to why people didn't like this movie. Seriously, I don't get it. I know that some people hated the dad, but I feel like this is a case of people misunderstanding the point of the story. And it just makes it feel like a bummer that we never got to see this franchise continue. The only thing related to the franchise that came after this was a video game that was based off of the movie that the townspeople were watching in the end. There was supposed to be a Chicken Little TV show that was going to air on Disney Channel in 2006, but it got scrapped in favor of making Phineas and Ferb instead. They were also planning on making a direct-to-video sequel to the movie titled Chicken Little 2: The Ugly Duckling Story, which would have involved Chicken Little being in a love triangle with Abby Mallard and a new girl who would have been a sheep. But it was also cancelled because the executives didn't feel that the original film had a wide enough market to draw upon to support the sequel. I guess sometimes we can't have nice things. Either way, revisiting this film was a nice trip down memory lane. Thank you all for watching and take care. In which Buck agrees, but warms him. But warms... I said it again. Let me just say, I remember... Blah.